Jerry here. Okay, while waiting for CG, roll call for judges, Himalaya.
Here.
Okay, thank you. Jessica,
Here.
Regina,
Here.
Fieri.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, um, CG should be here in a bit. Okay, CG, are you here and complete?
Yes, here and complete.
Okay, I need your speaking question. Please put them on the chat. All right, so everyone, very excited. Let's have fun. All the best for every team this round. You've made it this far, and it's such a great feat. So it's an honor to be able to be here and judge all of you. Without further ado, let's just start the debate. I welcome Prime Minister to open the case from opening government. Here.
Am I audible and clear, Kak?
Yes, you are.
Okay. POI, unmute yourself because I won't be looking at the chat box. Let me start my timer first. And I'll start my speech. In 3, 2, 1. All right, what we want in OG here is like we want more rich culture and more progressive people within our country. And what we have to defend is like how they prove that they're gonna unify all of these very diverse people without resulting a chaotic world and disintegration within the country on their side, and how the minority of the in that country will still get protection if they're become homogeneous. And what happens on our side is two things. First, we will respect. What we want is to have like better respect in terms of identity within the citizen, and secondly, we want like a faster growth within the country itself. And then moving on to my first argument, why pluralism is in a country is like much better. Two things. First, what happens is we will have like much more liberal people in our side. Why is it good? Two things. First, we will have like more diverse people. We will have like these many people in different backgrounds, in different kind of like race and stuff. So what happens is we will have like rich in terms of culture, and it can be a good things because when we have like a very good culture, it can be attract to kind of like have like a better kind of like in terms of check and balance in terms of making policy, because we want to protect and capture all of these people, because now we are kind of like very different, and the government is urged to kind of like protect all of them. And secondly, what happens is we will have like a better economic growth on our side, because when our side it become like much more liberal, what happens is the people will have like the incentive to kind of like have like this competition within them
Yeah.
to kind of like helping the country to get to a betterment in terms of like the culture, so that this country will have like a better economic. I'll take the POI later. And then secondly, what happens on our side is we will be like much more progressive. Three things here. First, what happens on our side when we become more progressive is we will have like a better social progress. What I mean by this, when this country is consist with a lot of different people, is people, and there will be like a incentive for the government to kind of like capture all of these people. So the social progression, any kind of like uniqueness of the people will be kind of like taking into account when this kind of like government creating a policy, because they want to capture all of these people. So what happens is when they kind of like promote some kind of like things, they beliefs or others, probably they're different, that is gonna be kind of like they will be taking it into account, because on our side, social progression is going to be much progressive on our side. And secondly, we will have like a better resilience against extremism and divisive ideologies. What I mean by this is, on our side, if we have like a very kind of like bad ideologies, and also we have like people that is too extremes about certain things, and if they're in the minority section in that country, on our side, we will the government will have like a better policy making in terms of cater all of these things, because we want to cater people, because on our side we are known as is known as we will known as like the country with a lot of the people with different background. So there is like a huge incentive for the government to protect these people. And then thirdly, what happens is, one on our side is we will have like a better international relation to strengthen the country itself. What I mean by this is two things. First, what happens on our side is we will like have like a better justice and human rights for everyone. So when these people are already kind of like being adapted towards like, oh, we are different and it is okay. So it means that when these people kind of like coming, there's like ideologies and other stuff coming from other country, and these immigrants, they will be accepted on our side. Comparatively on their side, they will not be getting accepted, because they will be seen as totally different, and these people will be kind of like homogeneous like kind of like mindset, and it's going to be very bad. And secondly, pluralism promotes like open-mindedness, what on that is on our side, and a better culture exchange, because on our side we will be accepting a lot of more kind of like any kind of like thinking, any kind of like way of ideology that is coming from another country, to kind of like to be in that to be in that kind of like to be integrated in the country. Or even for our minority groups, it will be gonna be much better, because we already kind of like be used to be kind of like different, and it is okay. And the mechanism is here is to what we want is to preserve the principle of equality of our races and ethnicity. Two things. First, the country should protect all types of races of people within the country itself. What I mean by this, there will be like a social contract. What happens in the social contract is there will be like less racism, because there is like a check and balance on our side. So if you're said, oh, there will be like huge racism that is happening, it's not gonna be happening, because if we are known as a country that is kind of like plural, it means that there will be like a social contract on our side that will kind of like cater this racism. So what happens is less racism that what going to happen. And secondly, all races will contribute to the growth of the country. What I mean by this, all of these kind of like different culture and stuff, they will definitely have to contribute to the country. For example, Indonesia, there is like nasi padang and stuff, or warung Madura. So they will be kind of like contributing towards the country, the country growth, because it's gonna be much more rich, and it'll attract a lot of other people. I'll take DPOI from CO.
Yeah, you said that you're going to cater to all the people, but how then you're going to cater, especially in Indonesia, when we have so many culture?
Yeah, as I've mentioned before, there is like a social contract on our side. So if this so all of these people that is coming from different background will kind of like be catered on this kind of social contract, because so racism is not going to be happening on our side, or even less racism that is going to be happening on our side. The way here's two things. First, in terms of scale, we won because we capture more people from different background in terms of policy and a better life. And secondly, in terms of vulnerability, we won because we capture people that are in the minority, because on our side, this minority will have protection from the government because of this social contract, since the country is consists of diverse background. And moving on to my second argument, why homogeneity within the country is going to be very bad. The context is here. In homogeneous country, everyone will have a standard of how they look, how they act, and how they believe. Means that everyone in that society is urged to fit in. So what is it going to be bad? It's three things. First, there is no intention to change for the better. And secondly, it will be very difficult for them to engage in kind of like in international, in the global community, because there is like a high risk of intolerance, because they feel like, oh, I'm very exclusive. For example, what happens in North Korea when they are being kind of like, oh, they're not accepting any technologies aside from the North Korea. And that's very bad, because they're not engaging with other countries. And then thirdly, everyone is trying so hard to fit in, because there is like this certain standards, and because it is kind of like being normalized in that country, within that country, because everyone agreed to that, because it is coming from the majority of that country. So everyone will have to fit in towards that standard. Especially, what about the minority, the people that is coming from totally different backgrounds? It's going to be very bad. So the way here is we protect the most important attribute to the human being, thus the gravity of benefit we want, because we affect the human we affect the most important things of human being. For that reason, proud to propose.
Thank you so much for that fine speech. Next, I call upon Leader of Opposition. Here.
Just to check, am I audible?
Yeah, you're audible.
All right, perfect. Just in case if I'm lagging, Jasmine, please inform me. Um,
Recording in progress.
okay, check. Check.
It's a bit echoey.
One, two, three. All right. Perfect. Okay. I have to change the device because when I open my camera, the internet just went down. Okay.
Yeah, it's okay.
Okay. I hope this is clear with that.
Yeah,
Without
this is
further
clear.
ado. Okay, perfect. Without further ado, I'll start my speech in 3, 2, and 1. Panos, OG has failed the moment when they assume that pluralism, which has exactly separate different cultures and they are actually building walls between cultures, declining and discouraging more communication and more bridges between cultures. That is when more society become more liberal and more progressive, and extremist divisive ideology is actually a shift. We will argue that exactly the moment when you encourage or you embrace pluralism and you say that it's okay for different cultures to separate themselves, that you get and you achieve a society which is more progressive. Exactly the moment when you separate them, people become more racist, people become less liberal, they become more conservative, as people have the ethnocentric tendency to actually regard their own culture as the best one. And that is exactly what leads to divisive ideology, extremist view, and actually a more conservative society. And with that, we take the opening government's whole point down. But secondly, the OG has also failed to explain what are the characterization of highly cultural diversity, pluralism, and homogeneity itself in the end of the day, and what does it entail, which is exactly what my setup is going to explain. 3 things. First, characterization of high cultural diversity. What does this entails? It means a massive differences in how you live your life, what the people regard as right or wrong, how conservative or progressive different cultures are, what are their religions, and etc. Do understand this means a huge differences in how you go with your life, which imposes a higher potential of conflicts, as frictions and clashes and differences is much more prevalent in countries with high cultural diversity. But secondly, what is pluralism? What will pluralism actually means? When you embrace pluralism, it means more separation, meaning walls between cultures, and this entails less dialogue, less communication, which leads to less understanding between cultures. Why is this so? Because the most important thing in achieving a harmonious society, which I believe what both sides want, is to have a media of communication, or at least make it possible at the very first place, which is very important to have, and is impossible to have in the government side. When separation is embraced and it's pushed not only by people's tendency to be biased to their own culture, but also when the government encourages and embraces pluralism. But thirdly, homogeneity doesn't mean you totally abandon cultural diversity, but in fact, you're trying to put more emphasis in similarities, the share of values, and even appreciating the differences in culture itself, as you're all living under the same country and government under the same laws and policies, which means government cannot automatically assume that when you embrace homogeneity instead of pluralism, you lose all cultural identity. That's not the case. But instead, we promote that, for example, in Indonesia, we have lots of culture, but we are still under the same flag, which is the Indonesia flag, under the same laws and regulation, the same undang-undang, for example. But getting to my substantive, two things that I'd like to talk about. First, why is it justified for the government to intervene and embrace homogeneity? But secondly, why is it better and what benefit it brings? But firstly, why is it justified for the government to embrace and promote it? The problem is, do understand that people have the tendency to not be open towards other cultures other than their own. Why is this likely to happen? Two layers into this. First, people have the initial bias and ethnocentric tendency to be more biased of their own culture, which makes them assume or regard other culture as lower than theirs and their culture is the better one. But secondly, it's uncomfortable for people without the aid of the country, of course, for people of a certain culture to step out and talk to and make friends with, or let alone trying to understand a different culture that is so distant that regard what they regard as wrong as right, and actually talk with these cultures that hold different values. It's much harder without the aid of government, which is exactly why countries should embrace this values like homogeneity, when it at least pushes people and at least tells people that you are living under the same country and you have certain similarities for you to share. Understanding this, it's very important for countries to embrace homogeneity. A narrative, ideology, and values that the country try to impose towards their people actually helps them to actually build bridges instead of building walls, which is very important under the context of highly divisive culturally in this kind of countries. Why? Because now you reduces the risk of friction, you reduces the risk of conflicts between cultures, and for example, separative regulation won't happen as much and people will be less racist. Why? Because they understand each other more. And getting to my second substantive, that is why homogeneity is therefore needed. They have their own separate values and what they regard as right or wrong. This is enough to explain that they have more diverse law, they have their own things and their own beliefs. And when the government step in or the country actually intervene and say that, no, you need to actually talk to each other, you need to actually lower the separation and actually reduces the walls between you and actually build a bridge and try to communicate and mediate any sort of differences, that is when a more harmonious society is actually achieved in our side. But let's see, what does the government has at their best case scenario? Even if in the government side where pluralism is embraced and they are not conflicting and are living side by side, we believe it's still worse. Why? Because they're living in a ticking time bomb. Silence within a society when there is no interaction between culture does not mean it's harmonious. When you avoid or you are uncomfortable when there are people from other cultures, this is far from what you regard as harmonious. It's a fabricated and artificial harmonious. It looks like harmony in the surface, but actually deep inside you are uncomfortable. You do not know the other side of the cultures. You do not exchange belief. You do not talk to them. You avoid them. That is the best case in the government side. And in their worst case, conflict happens. But even when conflict does not happen, we still believe it's worse. In our worst case, in the opposition worst case, even if decline in cultural identity does happen, we think it's still okay because one, it's not guaranteed at all, as homogeneity doesn't mean you totally abandon cultural diversity. You still can have your own culture. But also, secondly, more importantly, is the moment when you reach a more harmonious society, your culture is being respected more by other people from different cultures. And that is exactly what defends you and your culture in the end of the day. For those reasons, we're proud to oppose.
Thank you so much for that fine speech. Next, I call upon Deputy Prime Minister. Here.
Check, am I audible and clear?
Yeah, you're audible.
Uh, POI, just unmute yourself, and I'm going to start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Okay. first of all, response to the opposition team. So when they said about we protect the most important attribute to the human being, this in gravity of benefit we want because we affect the humans the deepest. So how are you gonna unifying this country without feel everyone left behind, especially the minority, since the one holding power to unify will be high likely from the majority. So some clarifying this in this stances. So pluralism means that creating bridges within the country. So first, on our side, pluralism means that everyone will have to engage with totally different races of people. So there is no such thing of creating bridges. And the second one is why is it likely like because on our side they are living under one country under the one identity, so they are forced to work with other people. For example, Indonesia, gotong royong, Sumpah Pemuda, or more realistic is UMKM, for example, where people are inviting people from another land to work for them, to like represent their culture and etc. It enforces everyone to work together, so no separation happens on their side of the house. So and some responses. First of all, it's so funny how opposition side assume the worst version of pluralism. Few respond in this debate. So first of all, we don't ban them to communicate. We explain the mechanism how they will tolerate themselves. For example, social contract, interaction, behavioral change, for example. And second one is, even if we have different, we push them to tolerate and embrace all differences. And we have the huge check and balance to mitigate racism faster. And the last one is, on their side of the house, they need to defend standard and very hard to acknowledge different. You discriminate, you racist further. And what's the weighing in this statement? So first of all, opening opposition lost the moment when they don't even understand the delta of the debate in this in today. And the second one is, the main idea of opposition team is people have superiority complex and prone to be racist. This is like incredibly self-defeating characterization. Few reasons why. First of all, if the characterization happens on both sides, it means most likely the standard is like majoritarian. It means that they will push and antagonize smaller groups. Why? There means there are more conflict on their side of the house, and chaos more happens on the side of the house. And also we agree that might happen, but understand our mechanism pushing for tolerance. Opening opposition never prove us how they will respect this, and this opening opposition harmony is waste. And also, even if we have different views within the culture, this is good because in like incentive to better themselves in their like worst case minority is getting pushed outside. For example, like Uyghur in China and stuff. So what's the way we mitigate the racism for better on opposition is unclear. So what's my contribution in this debate today? First of all, culture are people identity that we need to protect in this debate today. So cultural identity is an important part of who person is. For example, how they look, how they act, what they believe and stuff. So culture provide a purpose and meaning for many people life. For example, like through like the values, for example, the tradition, for example, and also their belief. For example, why is it principally justified to protect this culture? For example, if we erase the culture, there are conflict happens. Also separatist movement happen. I will explain it later. So conflict and bad impact. What I mean is, first, internally questioning themselves worth and purpose in their life. For example, without believing in their cultural identity, for example, people will feel forced to be someone else, means they cannot express themselves as who they actually are. They are forced to be fit in and trying so hard to fit in because they are standard access on opposition side. This makes them feel less valuable and will impact also to their mentally, for example, and they will have identity crisis. For example, when a person has to live like without their identity, this affect their mental well-being, right? So the second one is the second impact is first the second impact is between each other. Not trust feel like terrible, that's why conflict happen. Even if like minority got bully or discrimination in our side of the house, at least they like still have home, for example, or community, for example, in our side. They will feel not alone and they don't have to like fit into the standard because homogeneity cannot like guarantee this minority people will get less discrimination. And the last one is separatist movement. So how this is actually happen? For example, like huge protest to the government because they make the regulation, for example. So first of all, when their culture and their identity erased, for example, people will feel unacceptable. As we like when they feel it, people will like do protest because they don't their belief are erased and stuff. And second one is, the only one people will do protest are to the government because who made the regulation? It's the government itself. So and the last one is there will be like a more chaotic happens on their side of the house because people feel like not acceptable and stuff. People will get, for example, like people will yelling to each other. For example, people will protest to the government. People will like damage the government and stuff. But people need to work. For example, people struggle to their life, but if they don't or like, for example, like do protest like other people do, they will like getting judged, like because they because, for example, like they don't love their own culture, for example. So what's the way in this debate today? First of all, from the scale for vulnerability, we protect people's identity and freedom to express themselves. So who actually they are, we protect their belief, we protect their value, and we protect their identity as who actually they are. And also, what's the point in this debate today? First of all, we need people to like to get to have more freedom to express who actually they are, not to like fit into the, for example, like to the standard, for example, because opening opposition will, the standard will access at the end of the day. And also, we need them to like to having like identity as their value, for example, and why culture will erase. For example, first of all, not everything in that culture is the same, and the second one is probably there is like some similarity, but what make them unique, for example, is their the differences, right? And they erase with like it means they will kill their identity, who actually they are, like kill their value, kill their like identity, because their identity is their culture. And also the comparison on on our side of the house, and our side will protect the identity of who actually they are, and opening opposition cannot prove us how this identity will not get like erased and not unacceptable on their side of the house. And also getting less conflict because we protect the people, who we protect the culture. People will have their own community, people will have their own like home, for example. People will having like more valuable and not will feeling like less valuable and stuff. So with for example, and also between each other, we need to them to feel trust for each other and stuff. And also, what's the way in this debate today? We need to protect this vulnerable actor to like to having like value and having like their identity on our side of the house. So probably that's why we probably to propose this motion. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that fine speech. Next, I call upon Deputy Leader of Opposition. Here.
Am I audible? Sorry.
You are audible.
Okay. PI preference, just unmute. I will not be looking at the Zoom. Can you see me? Can you see me?
Yeah, we can.
Okay. Give me a second. Hold on. Just to clarify, is the time 7 precisely or 7:15?
It's 7:15, but the
Okay, thank
previous
you.
speaker did reach 7:15, so I just put 7. It's just
Thank you so
according to
much.
latest timestamp.
Okay. I'll be starting my sorry. I'll be starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Honestly, I don't think that opening government truly understands what we're talking about. Because number one, let's talk about the vulnerable actor and how in opening opposition, we protect the vulnerable actor more. So minority groups, they will be more protected the moment. So there is a shared identity that they're assigned with. How is this so? Let's see why minority groups are discriminated at the very first place. It's due to differences, unfamiliarity of cultures, and lack of shared identity. And understanding from other cultures, the moment when you give them a same identity of Pancasila or Merah Putih, for example, it's one step easier for people from different cultures to acknowledge the similarities they have. And let's talk about how minorities will be protected on our side of the house. Because at the end of the day, what we're talking about is that homogeneity does not imply erasing minority identities or enforcing cultural conformity. Instead, we aim to create a national identity that includes all people equally, protecting individual rights regardless of cultural background. And when laws apply uniformity, without cultural exception, minorities are going to be protected from discriminatory practices or differential treatment. So in our model, everyone receives the same legal protections and obligations, fostering fairness, security, and for all minority groups. Now, we are going to enforce strong anti-discrimination policies too. So anti-discrimination laws and policies can ensure that all cultural groups are respected and treated equally, rather than creating a distinct law for different groups which might reinforce separation. A homogeneous approach prioritizes inclusivity, where no groups is seen as the other or treated differently. By having laws that uniformly condemn and address discrimination, homogeneity allows minority to live openly within the broader society without the need for separate protection or enclaves, as their rights are universally respected. Now, also, a unified national identity can actively integrate elements of minority culture into the mainstream, so ensuring that they are respected and celebrated within the national narrative, such as national holidays, educational curriculum, public art that can respect diverse and cultural influence, so minorities can feel seen, valued without isolated, and a unified framework and that fosters pride among minority communities by incorporating aspects of their heritage into the broader society. There is room for personal and community-based cultural practices too, and this allows groups to preserve their language, tradition, customs in personal community settings and encourage cultural expression without creating rigid separation. Now, by encouraging this cultural expression within the broader context of shared national identity, minorities are going to be given space to celebrate their backgrounds while still viewed as integral part of society. So individual cultural pride will be strengthened without risking segregation or social fragmentation. And instead of being a pigeonhole of separate groups with unique and potentially isolating needs, minorities are going to be embraced as essential members of a cohesive whole. And integration can reduce stigmatization, improve access to resources, and promote equality in employment, education, and social setting. Now, what about representation, right? So a unified political system where minorities are included within the government, within the broader political structure, rather than through separate channels. So inclusion gives the same opportunity to influence national policies and foster equitable representation and prevent tokenism. And the political system, focusing on a single cohesive identity, ensure that minorities have a say in shaping national decisions, as their voices are considered part of a national interest rather than isolated interests. Yes, POI?
How are you unify these people with only what similar culture value? What about what make other culture unique and makes them their identity? How are you gonna still respect them in homogeneous country?
So in a homogeneous country, we are still going to be able to respect them because why? So this is how we're going to do it. This is the mechanics. 1, language and education. So a national language and a standardized education system can promote a common thread that binds people from diverse backgrounds and foster a mutual understanding and create equal opportunities and participations. And number 2, because of the shared identity we created, we celebrate a unified set of cultural values that creates a national identity accessible to all members, strengthening a shared commitment to society and legal uniformity. So a homogeneity supports uniform laws and practices. So it makes sure that citizens have equal rights to justice without cultural exemption that could create legal inequalities. Now let's talk about the way. So in our governance-based case, they may argue that it promotes vibrant and respectful society, each group maintain their identity, coexisting peacefully. In theory, this would lead to a diverse society in which contribution, mutual respect, and balanced representation. But this is talking about their best case scenario. And now, why is OO better? It's because even in a pluralist society with ideal mutual respect, separating cultural identity too strongly will lead to misunderstanding, marginalization, and social fragmentation. And added worse, pluralism could result in silent communities resistant to integration or collaboration, undermining social cohesion and potentially fueling tension between groups. In OO's case, moderate homogeneity, which is moderate homogeneity that lacks full cultural integration, at the very least, it will create a base shared identity which allows for constructive dialogue and cooperation across groups. Now, let's not forget that why is it justified? Because it prevents segregation, and one of the main things is that it can prevent xenophobia. Why? Because xenophobia will occur in government side of house because they're all going to be different, right? They're all going to be they have their own identities and they will be too afraid about the different people, the other ones, as we can call it. And they will, instead of interacting and being a whole, they will feel much more separated. They will feel, I don't think I'm very comfortable with this culture. I don't think I'm very comfortable with other cultures, because they feel the need to only celebrate themselves. They will be very selfish, and because because our government pushes the fact that we need to be united, we need to share an identity, this will lead to less separatism, this will lead to more integration, and at the end of the day, a much better and cohesive society where everyone is going to be much more tolerant and empathetic of others. That being said, proud to oppose.
Thank you so much for that fine speech. Next, I call upon government member moving into closing bench debate. Let us welcome them. Here.
Hey, am I audible?
Yes, you're audible.
Okay, give me a second to set my timer. Alright. Okay, if you guys have any POI, just unmute yourself because I cannot read the chat box. And if I didn't answer, means that I didn't take your POI. In the 3, 2, and 1. All of those opening benches never told us about what is the status quo happens right now. Okay, let's frame in status quo first. So we think there is no urgency for all that state, right? We think status quo is okay and already progressive. Society already educated to respect cultural diversity, right? Okay, let's take for example, why at the end of the day, you watch Susi Susanti playing badminton in represented in Indonesia. Although Susi Susanti is from Chinese ethnic, for example, why do Batak people also happy when Susi Susanti win? Why do Java people feeling proud? Exactly because you are Indonesian that bonding you as a citizen. Exactly because you still have those national identity. Okay, we think of we think that in status quo, national identity make you bonding, make you feeling that you are also Indonesians. So all this harm is never be okay. But okay, let's play. Even if there is a harm of racism and etc., why it is not the solution to solve all of those racism and etc., right? Okay, first let's take a rebuttals from what OO state. The identity that OO brings is that, oh, we want to make a harmony because we want to make we want to make them more unite. And okay, we didn't make all those cultural identity will be hilang or etc. But noted panels that at the end of the day, this will lead to emphasize on a single identity, right? Meaning that it will neglect of minority cultures. For example, societies that prioritize a single national or ethnic identity, this meaning minority cultures are often ignored or even banned. For example, local languages may be removed from the education system, and certain cultural tradition may be deemed irrelevant and unworthy. Because of this dominant narrative, policies and narrative that support a single cultural can create a perception that other cultures are inferior or unimportant, thereby reducing recognition and respect for the diversity. Okay, but let's play. Even if there are in their side, it will happen when other cultures are viewed as threats to dominant identity. Individuals from those cultures may experience dehumanization. Why? Because making them feeling their identity is worthless. That there will be social stigma, right? Different cultural identities can be stigmas in a homogenized society that causing individuals to feel isolated and unappreciated, right? So as OG didn't engage this is important because all the benefit won't be happen. So that is why CG came here to this debate. But okay, OO never told you about why at the end of the day, this policy will protect all of this, because let's framing the country that having a rich cultural, meaning that you have to protect 300 more cultural as Indonesian have, as Indonesian have, etc. All never told you how they will cater all of this, how they will cater all of those cultural, how they decide that inclusion policy will represent all of those cultural, as they never told you. So all of their Disney movie word that already told you will never be happening, right? Okay, so why at the end of the day we were more general from OG, but why at the end of the day all those general are very very important in this debate, right? Okay, let's come to the first argument. Why at the end of the day the rationality of morality that you have is a very very justification case that OG should bring in this debate. First is the parameter cultural is happen because that you are that is come from your ancestors, right? From Indonesia, for example, that already bring from opening bench, right? Okay, let's talking about the foundational values at the very very first place. The contribution of cultural groups like Jong Java, Jong Batak, and Jong Melayu, which represent the diverse identities that form the backbone of a nation, right? These groups fought for independence, embodying the values and aspirations for their people. Then ignoring their struggles undermines the very essence of national identity, which is often built on a mosaic of cultural narrative, right? So we think that why at the end of the day this will bring unity at the very very first place, not bring the walls that
Yeah,
also have been told you. No, thank you. Acknowledging the historical sacrifices made by various cultural groups foster a sense of unity and pride, right? In efforts, the idea that independence was not achieved by a single group but was a collective struggle, encouraging solidarity among citizens with the historic at the very very first place. Citizens know that all cultural are very very important. So meaning that the parameter you are born as a Batakness doesn't mean you didn't have the national identity that very very afraid from all, right? So meaning that also means that there is no inclusivity either. Means that if you are Bataknas and using Marga Miliala in back your name, means that you didn't want to get friends from Javanese or Melayunas, means that you still have that national identity when you are having the proud of your cultural, right? So you at the end of the day, this is a very very immoral government when you just forgetting all of those historic and all of those essential of those cultural, how at the end of the day all of those babies that born as Batakness, as Javanese, as Melayunas are very very proud to be born as that, right? So okay, second one, let's talking about how at the end of the day the productivity and ideal society will be happening outside, which will be more elaborated from OG. Okay, first, let's talking about how at the end of the day, this is the evil intention from the political interest and the economic motivation itself. Why? Because many authoritarian government pursue homogenization to consolidate power, right? By promoting a single national identity, it will suppress dissenting voices and minority groups, portraying them as a threat to national unity, right? These manipulations of identity can lead to oppression and human rights violations. So the nationalism will having an extreme nationalist movement often seek to erase cultural differences to create a pure national identity. This can result in discriminations against or even violence against those who do not fit the dominant mold. Meaning that the government are very very greedy and immoral and unrational when you just want to having that power. You want to having that one national identity so that you more easier to make that policy and etc. Right? And the second one is the economic motivation, because at the end of the day, the large corporation may advocate for homogenization to create uniform markets, right? By promoting standardized products and services, they can maximize profits without regard for local cultures and identities. This often leads to the erosions of unique cultural practices and business, right? The drive for a global economy can lead to the spread of a singular culture, primarily driven by Western ideals. Why? Because of the overshadowing local customs and the traditions itself. This economic pressure can force communities to conform and sacrificing their cultural identities. So meaning that you as government cannot protect your own local citizen and etc. Why at the end of the day all those benefit already told by OG, but why I didn't know that this can be happen also told by CG. So proud to propose.
Thank you so much for that fine speech. Next, I call on opposition member. Here.
Check. Am I audible?
You're audible.
Okay. First, we want to apologize because we cannot open the camera due to our bad connection, Kak. So, yeah. All right. Let me set my camera first. Okay. PI preference, just directly unmute yourself because I won't be able to check the chat box during my speech. All right. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. I just like to thank you to Kak Batara, Kak Nail, Kak Hafiz, Kak Arifa, Kak Amira, and everyone who has been with us since the very beginning of NOVED training. We want to thank the senior in HATS alumni, and everyone that has been encouraging for us. We are very proud to speak in NOVED Novice Grand Final 2024. Proud to oppose. But let's jump to my case then, panelists. Let's frame this debate in CO because OO and the opening bench are confused with how to distinguish the context of and OO is being half stance. Leave the opening bench and focus on us panels, right? Let's set up this debate from the start then. What is the process of homogeneity? It means that we are progressively merging the culture to one singular identity. It means that we still have the chance to do the culture practice privately, right? Meaning that it looks like China, for example, where the government make the educational system where everyone should learn Mandarin Chinese and not other Chinese, because Mandarin Chinese is the one singular identity that the government want to achieve, right? But it does not mean you cannot do your culture practice privately, i.e. talking in local language can still be done with your parents at home, for example. But then it works in a country like North Korea and China where they aim for homogeneity, right? Where China want all people to follow the practice of Han Chinese, where Tibet and Uyghur China should adapt with Han Chinese, learning about Mandarin, learning about their education and their religious practice and their spiritual practice. But see, in government bench pluralism, the context is Indonesia panel. So talking about Indonesia in their case is very hostile, right? Because Indonesia is the case of pluralism where there's one republic, but you aim for mutual stability. This looks like the traditional law as the base of the national law, for example, because they are qualified in the constitution, for example, because you teach cultural language in school in every area, for example, in Sundanese, in Java, in like the elementary school and like high school and all of that, right? But in China, we don't teach all of this culture, local language. We only teach Mandarin language. This is what homogeneity looks like. You should be very clear under CO, right? But then let's respond to OG first then. I think that they're only talking about the economic growth, more progressive, better justice rights later, and material showering benefits, and there's no clear logic and how it's achieved. 3 structural response to this. I think that the fact that Black Lives Matter in USA is still an ongoing movement since forever. They are the most plural country that speaks about democracy, the US, right? But there is still a big backlash, meaning that how in government they can provide essential work when it's not the reality that's happening in status quo, right? But B, the prerequisite to this is that you have to explain first how one government can embrace all cultures under government, right? Because the terms of social contract is never clear under OG. They are signing a contract with all the tribes. Is that what you mean? Because even if it exists, talking about contract in Indonesia is never enough. We have Pancasila, we have Undang-Undang Dasar and everything, but separatist movement is still exists, right? What are you trying to achieve with this social contract then? It's never clear. But see, even if it's true, the most progress you can achieve is limited because you need to cater to all culture, meaning that the moment you imply a policy that is different with the values of certain ethnicity, it will lead to conflicts anyway because you cannot please everyone under your side. Comparative under our side because there's one singular identity, meaning there's one singular goal that happened under the Republic of China. But let's respond to CG then. I think that the only case they bring in this debate is talking about social stigma whatsoever, right? But let me tackle their case with structural reasonings. Firstly, social stigma happen because you recognize the differences of people. You recognize their different skin colors, their genders, their language, because everyone have its own identity, right? Meaning these people will feel like their ethnicity is superior. Racism is government burden, is never our burden. You never respond to what if racism government is worse under your side. You should take this burden. But B, then let's bite the bullet, panels. Racism still happen under CO. We think that it's still less harmful, right? Because the racism is a sign of process of the merging culture. You are not used to type Chinese because you're Han Chinese, for example, but in the long term, it's a gradual process, right? You get used to living side by side with them because you recognize that you are the same now. Comparatively, there's no progress under government bench because you're always different, and meaning that racism will still happen. What is my contribution then? Firstly, I've taken down the whole government cases, but secondly, I will bring different case and contribution than OO did because we will focus more on merging our culture with the purpose of creating more development, diminishing the conflict, and having single identity to hinder the discrimination and hierarchy in society. Before I move to my contribution, I will take your PI.
Even if you can do the culture privately, you won't be accepted once you go out to the society anywhere. So what's the point of it?
The point of it is because the burden that you have been trying to bring is the sense of like the identity, right? Meaning that the sense of belonging with their own identity still happen under our side anyway. What do you mean that these people cannot bring it outside? Like what is the harm anyway of like they cannot bring outside when the identity itself is you preserve it with your local people, with your family, right? So meaning that it's still fulfilled under our side. You have to make your case clear first. But let's move to my case then, panels. I mean that I will respond to the burden pushed by the government bench since OO cannot answer this burden, right? Why when it's majority that become the identity, it's still not the problem because majority will still be relevant with the need of the whole citizen because usually the case when it comes to singular identity, the policies that will be implemented will cover the whole citizen, and this makes the policies become more general and that could be accepted by the whole citizens. But B, majority contribute more to the component of the country itself, like they are dominating in the creation of job field, for example, designing work culture, lifestyle, identity that's similar to one major culture would not harm the flow in that country, right? Why? And let's move to my contribution then. Talking about development in all aspects. 3 layers. I will talk about education. In India, the reason why it's hard to develop because they still believe the existence of hierarchy in society, i.e. Brahmana, the superior one, compared to Shudra, the lowest one. When they believe in homogeneity, it erased the hierarchy and believe that everyone is just the same and they will be judged based on their own equality, i.e. their ability and skill, right? In China, for example, other people than Han Chinese did not have the privilege to achieve good education because you're a minority. Now you need to adapt and learn Mandarin because it's important to apply in jobs and higher education in China, for example. Meaning that with our process of merging the culture, we achieve this effort in diminishing the structural discrimination because we make the education available for everyone because there's no hierarchy, because there is no discrimination, such things, right? Because you are one singular identity. But B, talking about social movement then, I think that in pluralism context of society, social movement like feminists and etc. will be hard to comply under government because there's too many differences. In our side, when everyone have one singular identity, you give the space for women to be in the equal space with men because you are the same, because you have the singular identity, right? But see, talking about economic development, I think that local people heavily rely on agriculture and etc. Any group most likely do economic agriculture, right? But in the context of status quo with the global warming, for example, you want to merge with the industrialization that is happening. That is why it's very clear under CO you should oppose. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that fine speech. Next, I call upon Government Whip. You're here.
Just am I audible?
Yes, you're audible.
Sorry I couldn't be on my camera because of some signal issues. So yeah. Wait, kok nggak bisa di-scroll? Oh. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Okay, so first of all, I would like to talk about on how I would like to give some comments for the opening opposition. The opening opposition's cases are too extremist when they talk about how pluralism is here, right? They talk about xenophobia and then talk about all those people who are scared of being different from other culture and etc. like that, right? When in reality, the scenarios that are bring by them cannot be counted because those are just very worst case scenario where it will only happen in one individual to most likely to not all the layers but just one or two people in those cases, right? Okay, they bring about the weighing where we believe that the weighing that was brought by opening opposition was too extremes. and could not be counted as a scenario because most likely will happen in only some individuals and not all. Okay, let's talk about their case. Even though the worst case brought by almost likely will if it happens in our side of the house, we believe that it will not happen, it will not likely to be happen in our side of the house because we will promote through because we want to promote this diverse through education and etc, and people will be more open in diversity and tolerance. So the problem, the occurs in their side happens because there hasn't been, because they do not promote this diversity and tolerance at the very beginning. So that's why people are not used to having difference in culture, uh, in in cultures. So at the end of the day, in our side, when you see people of different,
POI.
no, thank you. You will most likely to celebrate the difference of culture. So, to bring my contribution in this debate, I would like to talk about why, at the end of the day, national identity will still exist inside closing government. Okay, so A, pluralism indicates that the country is committed to embrace all its citizens equally. Embracing pluralist national identity shows that countries do not favor one particular culture, and this will help to create a stronger national identity because people feel that the state protects everyone's interest and culture and culture fairly. So we are not like forcing them to have to focus on just one culture and forget about their culture, like what's in opposition. And then B, when countries embrace plurality, they recognize that diversity is part of national identity, and this makes people feel that their differences are part of the country's good, such as wealth and not a harm. So on comparison with how oppositions both opposition benches see that this diversity will only create harm, but as the closing government, we will prove to you guys how that this diversity will be the country's good, not harm. For example, pluralist countries from national identity such as Indonesia, based on the motto Bhinneka Tunggal Ika, or Unite in Diversity, which reflects that diversity is what unites the nation. We see that this diversity has helped Indonesia a lot in terms of economic, tourism, and etc. Even uh, even in the worst case where conflicts will happen, and we acknowledge that majority and minority will exist, but at the end of the day, when talking about this. We still embrace the citizens equally because we all take part on that side.
POI.
No, thank you. Java will become majority. It's just because they have more more popularity. Okay, now moving on to why why talking about the weighing that was brought by OG isn't strong enough to win this debate, where they want to protect uh, minorities and human rights, but with their mechanism and impacts, it wasn't strong enough. To compare to weighing by CG, where we want to put stigma and to push stigma and progressivity, well, will be a long term because they are taught to be diverse, and also taught to be have higher to have higher tolerance at the end of the day. So it's not just, so at the end of the day, we could still protect this minorities, and we could still protect this minorities. Okay, now we do okay, so moving to CO. They questioned us what will happen, how racism will look like in our side of the house, right? Racism still happen. We do acknowledge that racism still happen, but and we accept that both sides. Racism could be happen in both sides, but homogenize is not the solution. So let's play in Delta. As they keep talking about unity, we already told you that reinforcing power. My first speaker already told you about reinforcing power dynamics, where homogenization often reinforces existing power structures where dominant groups maintain control over their political system. This can result in the continued marginalization of minority voices and the policies that address their needs. And then centralized decision making where the policies may overlook the diverse needs of various communities, leading to decisions that do not reflect the realities on the ground and further entrenching hierarchies. So as long as they cannot prove how the policy on homogeneous will capture all those culture, they cannot win this debate. And then secondly, they talk about hierarchy in India, but they never told you the process logic, how it all will be solved by their mechanism and by their mechanisms, right? Because at the end of the day, the root problem in India is because of the economic disparity. But okay, even if homogeneous exists, why will it still hard? Lack of representation. When a dominant culture is prioritized, it often results in the underrepresentation of various communities in political, social, and economic spheres, where it will lead to where perpetuating will exist in the hierarchies. So talking about casta and etc. will still happen in their side in their side of the house. So what has CG proved to you? Why our why in terms of why on terms of weighing the stigma and progressivity will be the correct way to solve this problem. And secondly, we have uh oh yeah, okay, that's all from me. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that fine speech. Now, let's welcome Opposition Whip here.
Okay. Hello, is this audible?
Audible.
Okay. Pure, just unmute yourself. Okay, starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Before I start, I want to say thank you to Kabatara, Kanail, Hafiz, Arifa, and Amira, Senarian Hats alumni, and everyone who has been with us since the beginning of NOVED training. Today, we are very proud to speak in NOVED Novice Grand Final. Okay, few responses then, and why we are way better than OO. We think that what's happened under OO is basically they just told you that, oh yeah, they basically just going to embrace, and there's going to like minority can still do practice, and there's going to be equal representation, and there's going to be like less separation, and so on and so forth. But within that, why CO way better than OO is because we told you that first there's the process in which it's going to be gradual. So whatever the other benches said that yeah, that it's going to cause so many chaos and so on and so forth, we told you already that there's going to be gradual process in which there's going to be the process of adaptation from for example minority or the people who have different cultures basically in that country, right? So secondly, then we also told you that there's going to be like more impactful manifestation. We told you that there's going to be more development on the other side of the house. Like for example, we told you like people in India when they only like using when
Yo,
they
hey, OG.
agree or later when they agree that there's going to be like hierarchy and so on and so forth. The difference when it comes to like homogeneity in which all the people will be seen the same. We told you already there's going to be equal chances for job field and so on and so forth. Secondly, also we told you that why the manifestation better on our side like in terms of women, for example, like back then probably because there's the traditional value in which it's perceived that women should not attend school, but now when it's homogeneous, it basically it understand that there's the importance for women to have participation, to go to school, to attend school, for example. So we think that our manifestations and in the impact on the scale itself is way better under CO, way better explained by my first speaker. Now moving on to CG then. CG basically told you firstly that economy will be driven by Western and we're going to lose our local product. Firstly, I don't understand why then our local product would not going to be able to be sold again in the current status quo. Like we're still going to be able to sell it because yeah, basically we think that local product is not the part that being discussed in this debate itself, because majorly we're talking about like for example religion, we're talking about like language and so on and so forth, right? Or like hierarchy that exists in India. But secondly then, even if it's driven by Western, we think it's okay, because understand what my first speaker told you, that there's the existence of tribe in which they usually heavily rely on agriculture, for example, and when it's driven by Western, I assume it's going to be like industrialization happens. We think it's way more beneficial in the economic benefit, right? Because we're going to receive more economic growth since the people would not just going to heavily rely on agriculture. We're going to have like economic diversification in which the people would get more benefits in terms of economic, i.e. they will get better salary, more stable job, and so on and so forth, right? But secondly, then they told you that it's going to lose like the respect towards the historical efforts done by the heroes back then, like in what happened in Indonesia. First, I don't understand that why we're suddenly not going to respect the heroes, because understand we would still going to learn history. We're going to still have history class in our curriculum, right? So it means that the student itself would still going to understand that they should respect. But secondly, then we think that there's still the incentive to respect these heroes, because understand that we believe that we
OG.
won't be able to have our current condition if it wasn't because of the heroes that fight for us back then, right? But yeah, moving to their second speaker, they told you that there is going to be like racism would happen under both sides, but we think that racism would be happen more under layers of the house, since what we told you already, that there's the existence of cultures that feel that they're way more superior comparatively to the other culture. We think that this exists on the their side, but what's happened on our side? We think that the moment when you like have like homogeneity exists, like means that you're going to like have the sense that, oh yeah, we are the same, and it means that it's not again about like superiority when you come from a certain culture and so on and so forth. But before I move on, yeah, take the PI.
CO and Tark is literally explaining minority have to suck up to the majority standards to be recognized and survive. By that expression only, for minority in public by OG is the only important metrics in this debate.
Firstly, okay then. Firstly, we told you already that this is going to happen gradually. So it's not going to be like in the form of the worst case scenario, like oppression that will be happen like so chaos and so on and so forth. But secondly, then we told you already why, even if it's going to be pander to like the majority side, we told you why it's going to be better. Because firstly, we say that the majority, the culture who's dominant in that country, have contributed a lot. They are the domination in they are the component that dominate in that country. For example, they provide the job field, for example. So that's why you need to pander. Like for example, in China, if you are being pushed to learn Mandarin, it's okay, because why? The people in the China, when they wants to like accept you to have a job, for example, you gotta have to be able to speak in their own language, because the majority in that country, if they wanted to communicate, they use that Mandarin language that they prefer the most, right? So in the end of the day, the end goal is that you're still going to receive benefit and development under our side of the house. So it's not just to say that. But okay then, let's moving on to like OG then. OG told you like so many benefits, right? But they never explained to you what's the likelihood, or they never told you how then this is going to be achieved then. Like for example, they told you like there's going to be social contract, but they never told you why that it's going to be enough as a check and balance. My first speaker told you that even in Indonesia, with the existence of so many rules, like we have traditional rules, for example, we also have like Pancasila, for example, and Undang-Undang, for example. But in the end of the day, separation still happens, and racism still happens under our sector. So it means that the recognition of pluralism that happens in Indonesia does not tackle effectively to the racism that happens. The social contract does not enough. So that's why we should move into like homogeneity, because the moment we recognize homogeneity, it means that it's going to be universal. The people is going to be the same, recognize one singular value. Okay, then OG told you that like basically pluralism better because there's going to be economic growth, but they never told you what kind of economic growth. They never told you how then it's going to be achieved. But secondly, then they told you that government can tackle to all the people. I don't understand why this suddenly can happen under their side, because clearly they never told you how the likelihood that people that all sudden the government could suddenly tackle to all the people. On my POI, I asked them like how then you would achieve when there's so many culture to be accomplished on the very first place. So it means that it's not feasible under their side of the house. For example, Indonesia, if we wanted to recognize the whole pluralism that happens in Indonesia, it's going to be impossible to tackle to all of them, because understand they all have different demand to be fulfilled. So even understand that different demand, it already create conflicts between the cultures itself. So it means that conflicts and racism would just happen under their side of the house. But secondly, then they told you that like culture has a meaning and an identity. I think that my first speaker told you that you could still do the practice of your culture and privacy and so on and so forth. But secondly, then I think that even if like you lose the identity, the way is that you would gain more benefit than our side. That's like industrialization and so on and so forth. But then under your side, you're just going to gain personal benefit or communal benefit that does not tackle to all of the people. And for all of those reasons, proud to oppose.
Thank you so much for that fine speech, and that marks the end of the debate. For everyone, once again, thank you so much for debate. It was really wonderful. Um, we wish everyone the best of luck for announcement later. For judges, let's move to breakout room for deliberation. Thank you so much, everyone. J1 for judges only.